Welcome to Demystify Magic with Molly and Madison.
I'm Molly, a former skeptic, now full-time energy healer, author, and your resident science meets spirit nerd.
And I'm Madison, a born and raised witch, teacher of the craft, and owner of not one, not two, but 3 metaphysical businesses.
Together we dig into low-effort witchcraft, spirituality, and the science that backs it all up, all with humor, heart, and a sprinkle of chaos.
So whether you're a curious skeptic or a seasoned witch, find a cozy spot, take a deep breath, and let's demystify some magic. Howdy doody, friends.
Howdy doody.
We have a very special guest for you today. I am so excited. We have Lorraine Monteagut, PhD. She's a queer Latin witch, astrologer, and author of Modern Witchcraft for Dummies and Brujas, The Magic and Power of Witches of Color. Lorraine studies the diverse backgrounds and traditions of contemporary magical practices, and she's also the creator of Witchy Heights, where she teaches folk magic, ritual astrology, and spiritual activism. But most importantly, she's also my friend. And I'm very excited to talk to her about this book today. I am obsessed with Modern Witchcraft for Dummies. I'm so excited to see witchcraft entering the mainstream in this way, and I'm so glad that it was you who got to do it. Lorraine, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited you're here.
So,
your books have been on my shelf forever, and I feel like Madison has talked so much about you that I feel like I know you, that when you said, like, it's nice to meet you, I'm like, oh yeah, we haven't met before.
This is our first interaction. And
I love it.
Going splendidly so far.
10 out of 10. So glad. So we usually start the podcast off, I'm not sure if you've listened before, but we have a little ritual that we start with that we call our magic moment of the week. And it's really just where we share small moments of our practice really showing up for us really showing up for our practices, moments of gratitude. It kind of really can be anything. It's taken on a life of its own, or really it's just been anything positive in our lives in the past week. So we'll start off with, what was your magic moment this week?
I'm house sitting for a friend, and it's a mid-century house with one of these really impressive center of the house fireplaces. And having moved to Minneapolis from Florida, I was really looking forward to fireplaces, but I don't personally have one in my own house. So every time I'm around one, I make sure I use it. So I've been sitting in front of it and burning stuff and burning it.
Love.
You know, the full moon was yesterday, the full moon in Cancer, or the other day. Time is strange still to me.
It was recent.
Time in early January. There's no time.
Yeah,
it happened at some point.
So that has been my magic moment, is sitting by the fire in this new cold place. I've never experienced real winter, so just really enjoying the fire element.
I love it. I love Minneapolis. I was there for the first time a couple months ago and just like obsessed with that city. The public transportation is amazing. And also my husband's obsessed with Menards. If you haven't gone yet,
yes.
Highly recommend.
I discovered Menards. Yeah, it's just everything in one. Yeah, Midwestern stuff is bigger here, for sure. And the people are wonderful. It's a very activist community in South Minneapolis where I am.
I love that. I love that. So I'm curious about, for Modern Witchcraft for Dummies, I feel like Modern Witchcraft, there's so many directions you could take it, right? Like you could write a whole shelf of encyclopedias and just scratch the surface. How did you decide what to include?
Oh, what a question. It really was the hardest and the longest part of the process, was creating the table of contents and the direction I was going to take. Ultimately, I kept centering the beginner. Though the book can be used by more advanced practitioners, it is meant for beginners. So I set aside all of the ambitions for encyclopedias and thought, let's give an overview. So of course it won't be absolutely comprehensive, but it's going to be a good snapshot of the modern ways that we are taking witchcraft principles into our lives and, into different cultural backgrounds that we come from. A lot of these things I talk about in the book are not per se witchcraft, but in the modern world have been, taken, sometimes appropriated towards witchcraft. So I make sure to talk about these different cultural backgrounds that we all come from.
I love that. I love that. Do you have an example of like something that's not historically witchcraft, but is in the book because it's kind of like been squished in with witchcraft principles?
Yeah, so my first book, Brujas, really deals with this is in terms of people of Latina origins or Afro-Caribbean origins. We come from, I am myself Cuban and Colombian, and we come from these earth-centered traditions that are not necessarily witchcraft. In fact, a lot of our background, like witchcraft has been a very bad word.
Hmm.
It's what we've used to say, it's synonymous with evil.
Hmm.
But in recent times, the children of immigrants in this country have returned to those traditions, and with our witchy mindedness, have said, how can these things be brought to life in our current world? So in my, in Cuban culture, we have Santeria, which again is not considered witchcraft, but it's saint worship. It's a religion of saint worship. And a lot of that stuff we bring into our modern magic, knowingly, with eyes open, knowing this stuff that our grandparents practiced were not necessarily considered witchcraft, but we honor it in our own practice and we bring it into the larger umbrella of our witchcraft practice. Now that gets complicated. There are a lot of things that could go wrong and awry. And in particular is, this big scary word, appropriation.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Appropriation is not necessarily good or bad. There are a lot of things that we appropriate. In all traditions, there is an element of appropriation. But when done without, in an ignorant way or without respect, that's where we get into the difficulties
Hmm.
of not honoring our past or not, like superseding the wisdom and the practitioners who have been doing this and been persecuted for it in the past.
Yeah.
So in Modern Witchcraft for Dummies, I made sure to include these traditions that are, whether we like it or not, they are being appropriated. They are being brought into modern witchcraft. And so we should know about what those things are, and we should, with open eyes, decide, am I following these practices, and why? And so I really did center those ethical concerns.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yeah, I feel like there's so many practitioners these days that they're like, oh, if it's appropriative, I'm just going to leave it out. But then that just continues that cycle of like new practitioners not knowing where it came from, but hearing it and feeling like it should be a part of their practice. So I love the fact that you tackled that head on and we're like, no, we're going to talk about this and you're going to learn about it. And then you make that choice about whether or not it's part of your practice. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think knowledge is the thing that really does help people obviously learn and grow. I've thought that sentence in my head and I was like, yeah, clearly. But when you're able to make that decision from an informed place rather than just hearing, oh, this is appropriative, but I don't know how or why. And so, okay, I just won't touch it. And then it becomes this scary thing that you can't ask questions about. I think that can be really counterproductive. And so I love that you took that kind of like head-on approach to it.
Thank you. And my motivation for that was not so much, all the bad stuff that happens with appropriation, so much as the modern witch that is emerging is not necessarily very connected, at least in the United States, on this side of the world, to the Euro-pagan traditions as witchcraft has been in the past. Like I wrote this book as an update to Wicca for Dummies,
Mm-hmm.
which was very specific to just Wicca and the Euro-pagan traditions. And, a lot of us growing up in the United States don't have any connection to European roots.
Yeah.
Some of us do, of course, a lot of us have European ancestry, but even those folks, might not have that direct tie anymore. So I thought that was my motivation really, is to be inclusive more than we've seen some witchcraft books be in the past.
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the reasons that I was so excited to hear that you were writing this book of all people was, so Lorraine and I used to run a book club together. It was very fun. And one of the things that I really loved in watching you teach is seeing how easily you meet people where they are, which is, I think, the most essential part about writing a For Dummies book. What are the most common myths or assumptions that you've seen beginners come into their craft with, and how did you try to combat those with Modern Witchcraft for Dummies?
Oh, so, I guess I wouldn't even call it combating. again, like you said, I like to meet people where they're at, and it's usually like a gentle opening too. I do think that it's very rare, like when we're chronically online, it's really easy to get into these rabbit holes where we like are reprimanding each other for the way that we're practicing. But what I found is in real life, like face-to-face interactions, it's really rare to come up with those really combative moments with people. Mostly people are coming because they're curious, and I like to honor that curiosity. And of course, people will say things that I find to be a little closed-minded every now and then. And my antidote to that is to say, what about this? Like look at this thing and let's read this book together. And I always frame it as like, I'm learning with you. So that's why the book club, Madison, that we did was just so wonderful. And I'm so happy it's continued since I've left.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, because you meet each other in this equitable place where we're all, concerned with the same topic. We're all coming at it from page one. We're all reading together, and then we're adding our experiences and our practice to it. And so I think that creates like less of a structure of I am teacher and you are student, and more of like this is a circle of learning. And learning is the point, and we're so excited to be here to learn. So that's how I always address everything. Like when it gets a little heated, I'm like, okay, well, let's cite some sources. Let's talk about it. But also, I'm also weary of like, let's be really rational and cerebral about this because everyone brings their emotions to things and their backgrounds to things, and those things are valid as well. So yeah, people bring their emotions to things, and I think that's also really valid. And giving people space to talk about those experiences and emotions that they're bringing to the table, like always leads to more fruitful conversation. And conversation is the point, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I love anything that kind of breaks down that wall between teacher and student. I think that, I think it's so important what you brought up about people online and that kind of animosity that is built up. And I think that a lot of that is almost like a protection thing of, well, if I establish myself as the person who knows everything, then no one can challenge me. And then I don't have to feel any discomfort. And I see all of that fall away immediately with in-person conversation. And that's what I love so much about having the book club, and any kind of like any time that we can gather at the store, I think is my favorite part, because I see a lot of people come in kind of afraid that they're going to have that experience of that combative energy, and watching other people realize that, oh no, it's not that scary to have those conversations and to talk about those things and have questions.
Yeah, I think one great example of a book we read that did this was Queering the Runes.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think, are they called Siri? I think that's their name, who wrote the book. They were actually
Mm-hmm.
here in Minneapolis recently.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and I think this is such a great example of like such a difficult territory of the runes having been appropriated by Nazi propaganda.
Yeah.
And so people are scared to come to them anymore. And that book allows us to separate those things and to say, no, these runes, really have a separate history from that, and we still have a valid connection to them. And how can we reconnect in a, not fascist way, not racist way, to these symbols that clearly still, speak to us. So I think more of that. We need more of that.
Yes.
The bravery to tread into like really shaky territories.
Mm-hmm.
That is fascinating. I did not know that about runes. I know virtually nothing about runes. And so I'm like, well, now I got to pick that book up.
Yeah, I didn't either, which is what I was saying before, is that with the book club, I was coming to these topics also as a beginner.
Mm-hmm.
Like my particular, expertise is in Afro-Caribbean diaspora religions, and this is more, Nordic and European. And
Hmm.
so it was wonderful to go through that exercise of coming to something as a beginner in a very cautious way, because I heard about all of these things. And I'm like, immediately the way that we flatten everything again on the internet is like, Nazi bad, runes bad,
Mm-hmm.
don't touch
Yeah.
them. And that's how things become stigmatized and, evil over time.
Mm,
So
yeah.
this book helped me realize like, no, runes are not evil. Nothing is inherently evil. But we must come to things with awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that just deepens your own practice too. Is like the more you kind of delve into the history, we're always talking about like when you're exploring a new practice, you know, diving into the history just makes it that much more rich when you're doing it for yourself. I'm curious, one of the things that we hear a lot from beginner witches is they feel overwhelmed by choice. There's so many options. Where do they start? How does your book address that? And is there like a part of the book that you think is like, you start here if you're not sure where to start?
Yeah, I organize a table of contents and like the order of the book to start to kind of handhold beginner witches through those questions. So you start at the beginning of the book, and very simply, it's just what is your personal connection? Some of us get really caught up in bloodlines and genealogy and history, and of course, that's how I came to my practice. So that is extremely valid and
Mhm.
powerful. But some of us haven't, and some of us are just really interested for the first time in our family. Like we are the first ones interested in this, perhaps. And so, or we just are cut off from our ancestry. And so I ask people to begin wherever they're at. So, it could be that you watched a show and you were really connected to those characters, like me with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Such a nerd for it, and like my really coming out in both a queer way, but also which way, which those two things are very linked, right?
Mm-hmm.
Came through that show. And so as much as I with my mind say, well, my great grandmother was a spirit medium from Cuba and that's why I'm connected to it, like really also my passion comes from that little show from the 90s, and the book really guides you through what is your inspiration point and what is your motivation and what is your special power. And I think it empowers the reader through information as well, is like, assume you know nothing. So like, what does clairsentience mean? What does the word magic mean versus the word sorcery? Just all of these kinds of like definition level things, so that as you go along, you're both evaluating your role and your like background and your entry point, and also like your emotional landscape, but also learning the basics. So yeah, I hope that as you progress through the book, at least the beginning part, it's helps you just develop a really sustainable practice that feels like your own. And then as you go through the book, then you get into like the actual traditions that you might start to explore that, are very systematic. Like a lot of traditions, require you to go through initiation and require you to do things in a certain order. And that's all wonderful. But I'd love for people to like meet themselves where they're at first and get to know the excitement about, like the path to witchcraft before they get all bogged down by all the choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
I love the way that the table of contents is set up in this book. It is like such a true reference book where each chapter, it's not just like chapter 1 blank. It's each kind of section is titled, making it really, really easy for people to kind of follow that passion, to say, oh, this sounds like what I heard on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which Lorraine was it was standing in a group with Lorraine and Anthony, which is where I finally was like, okay, I have to go home and start watching Buffy right this instant because I cannot not be included in these conversations. Everybody's so excited and I want to be a part of it so bad. But kind of you can see the places where like something might light up for you, which is what I love so much about it. I'm glad you brought up your book Brujas because I wanted to talk a little bit about that as well. These two books definitely have like some through lines that I love to see the connections, but also they're very structurally different.
Yes.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about Brujas and what might make it different from Modern Witchcraft for Dummies? Because I love that you have such a narrative structure with one and then such a like amazing reference material with the other.
I like to think about it in terms of when the books were birthed and what zodiac signs they are. So Brujas is a Libra. So Brujas is about beauty and story and relationships. And it really comes out of my dissertation work. During my PhD, I wrote about Bruja reclamation, which is, like the way that People of my generation are returning to their ancestral traditions in various ways, so many different traditions. There's no like one way to do this. So what I did was focus on meeting people and speaking with them for extended periods of time, recording and transcribing our conversations and writing the stories from there. So each chapter focuses on a different practitioner from a different part of the Afro-Caribbean diaspora or the indigenous Americas. So there's lots of different traditions. When you read the book, you'll get like a little overview of like the main kind of forces at play that we are pulling from as Latina or Afro-Caribbean or Indigenous American immigrants. Well, the Indigenous Americans are not immigrants, but the rest of us are, and again, pulling those threads to create something new in the present moment that we are calling witchcraft, that our grandparents definitely did not call witchcraft. It's really, it was a really complicated thing at the time, and I was really scared to write it because I was like, I'm gonna piss so many people off, and I did. And and I'm not going to get it 100% right, and I didn't, but it was my way of kind of like saving my dissertation from obscurity. And again, it's not perfect. I'm proud of it, but sometimes when I read it, I cringe a little because I'm like, oh, I didn't know that then. That is the constant struggle of being a public writer, is like your work will be out there forever now, and you've changed since you've written.
Can't wait.
And the reason I say cringe is not because of anybody else's stories or like the information. It's more that it was also part memoir, and I was writing it during 2020, and I had recently gone through a personal tragedy. A really terrible thing happened, and then the shutdown happened, and I was just in a cesspool of feeling, by myself, isolated for a year, and thankfully I coped by writing this book. I don't know that I could have the strength to do that now, honestly, but I am in awe that I actually just sat and wrote somehow instead of baking bread and planting a garden like everyone else. That seemed really fun. That's what I would do now if I had to get.
Yeah. This is your pandemic baby, Some people had human children.
Yeah, it was my pandemic baby. And so in that way, it's not, perfect, but it was of a time. And I think that really it has a lot of heart, as a Libra does. And it's really beautiful and raw, and it is story based for sure.
Yeah. And so then I'm also curious of like, what was the difference? Obviously, writing this book, we were not in a shutdown. Things were very different, like in the outside world. What was it like to write a reference book in comparison to this like much more vulnerable part memoir, deeply personal story?
Yeah, it was tough in a whole different way. This book was an Aries. So this book was fast and furious. It was a matter of circumstance. My agent, said, hey, do you want to write a Wiley book? This is on the table. And I said, okay. And there was definitely, it was more impulsive and less like drawn out as the first one had been. The first one had been like 10 years of work, and this one was just like, boom, do you want to do this? And I'm like, sure. I think from start to finish, I wrote the whole thing in like 6 months. And Madison was like witness to this time of my life where I was, running my own business and doing this at the same time, and I barely slept. And that's why it was hard. I didn't have the time of a shutdown, to take forever on it, which, was difficult in its own way, but it was more straightforward. And there is something that was easier about that I was like, I wrote a table of contents, and now just write the table of contents, one chapter at a time very quickly. So I am really proud of how much I was able to accomplish in such a short period of time with the book. And I think the reference is just as important as the narrative. I think they both have their role in our studies.
Totally. And like two different types of readers, right?
Yeah.
And can I just say that 6 months, I have never been more impressed with a human being, because we were doing that book club. You were running Witchy Heights, your like physical location. You're writing this book, and we would see each other once a month, and it was as like Spellcrafter was very new as well, and we would just meet and look at each other with pain in our eyes. Like, how you holding up?
Deep understanding.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I'm not gonna lie, it definitely burned me out, like the whole thing, not just the book itself, but that period of time.
Yeah.
And then, where then we were getting into like the tail end of that was, the Trump presidency coming rearing its head again. And
Mm-hmm.
it kind of broke me a little. And since then, I've been a bit burned out, I must admit.
Yeah.
It's been recovery mode ever since.
Yeah. I'm curious what that recovery mode looks like. Like, do you have any practices that you lean on for it? Because I know you're not alone. Like,
Yeah, well,
as someone who
I
also
moved to a
recently
whole.
finished writing a book.
What? Oh, really? Oh, we'll have to talk about that.
Yeah.
I moved to a whole different state. So
Hmm.
I think there was a little bit of an escape mode that happened. I'm in a same-sex partnership. I'm a queer Latina, and being in Florida didn't feel tenable anymore for many reasons. And I'm also 40 now. I turned 40 last year, and it was like a switch went off. Like midlife crisis is real, y'all. I am in the midst of one. I'm still in it, and it is what people say. Not everyone goes through one, but when you do, it is kind of like textbook. And I never thought I would be like so basic, but I'm like just having a basic bitch midlife crisis right now. I just moved all the way across the country, changed my whole life, and I'm still reeling from all of that and still trying to find my footing. There's something about being somewhere your whole life. There's a reason why it was so hard to leave Florida
Mm,
because all my roots were there. You know, no matter what you think about your hometown, like it is where you have, people, and knowing people really is a huge thing. You network, every job I ever found, every work, all the work I ever did was like from networking and just
hmm.
talking to people, and then moving all the way over here, it's just you figure out one thing and then another thing falls apart and then you have to tend to that and then the other thing falls apart and I'm like, whoa, I'm just experiencing like in real time what it's like to be kind of like alone,
Mm,
in a new place. So how do I cope with that and what is my practice? I have been using tarot again for myself. I'm a reader, but like I hadn't really been doing it for myself a lot. And since I moved here, like it's like my crutch. And
hmm.
honestly, I need to like, you know, step away sometimes and not do it so often because the cards will start diluting themselves. But that's what I've been doing is like a lot of reflection, a lot of journaling and coming to the deck again and again just to remind myself that there is still magic because I guess so this is what I'm getting at is I was able to be a weirdo and channel magic and make that part of my life down in Florida because like I had that foundation here. I have to get like a quote unquote real job. I have to
Mm,
like make more money to sustain the expenses, and that can really quell the magic for me,
Mm-hmm.
mm.
and so I'm still trying to find that balance. People think that if you've written two books, like that's it, you're a full-time writer, that's your life, but the reality is that writing does not pay well, and I'm still, I had to pull away from my own business that I started in Florida, and that's not sustaining me anymore. So it's kind of like a whole start over. I'm feeling the way I did when I was 23 years old in some ways.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so relatable. I know, I lived in New Hampshire during college, which is like very close to Maine. It's like a drive, a couple hours. And I remember just feeling so lonely because I'd go to the grocery store and no one would look familiar. Like I grew up in small town Maine where it's like, oh, you're seeing people you went to high school with and the
Yeah.
bagger is always the same and whatever. And then I would go and I was like, I don't recognize a single soul. Like I would go an entire day without like smiling at someone. And it really it changes you when you don't have those touchstones, even if you don't know the person's name, like the bagger with the gray hair and the bagger with
Yeah.
the funny earrings and whatever. Like, and yeah, I think it's like you said, it can kind of be almost like disorienting and throw your practice off a little bit too when you have to start fresh like that. I'm curious if it's ever difficult for you, like as you mentioned in this transition, has it ever been difficult for you to balance your identity as a scholar with your identity as a witch, or have those things always kind of gone hand in hand?
It is difficult to balance when I'm trying to, you know, secure a professor position at a university which I have
Mm-hmm.
since stopped trying to do. In a lot of ways, I feel like, what did I get a PhD for sometimes? Because
Mm.
that's that's what you get it for, is traditionally to get a tenure track position at a university, right? And I just really couldn't reconcile those identities in that space, at least not up to this point. I hold out hope that maybe one day, like a shining position will open up that'll be just for me. Like I know in the UK there's like a whole program in the occult. I would
Mm-hmm.
love, I
Ooh.
think it's Exeter. I don't remember exactly, but it would be wonderful to be able to do that here.
Mm-hmm.
But until then, it does really go hand in hand in my own practice. Like it always has. Like the
Mm-hmm.
reason I learned about all of these things was through my academic research. That was my entry point. So like, for the baby witches out there, that's what I mean by meet yourself where you're at. Like that was my entry point, was my own research and my questions and my curiosity. And then that opened the way to some genealogy research and, bringing in some pop culture stuff. So it is really married for me, those two things. What I have more difficulty reconciling is that academic witch scholar thing with the world that requires me to pay my bills.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that pesky thing. It's so fucking cool hearing you talk about doing a PhD dissertation on brujeria.
Mhm.
It's like just, I think for me, it's almost harder to reconcile those two things of with my experience with people in academics. I'm like, how on earth do those two things meld? And it's so cool to hear the way that they do. I'm in my mind, I'm like, well, then we just all start a school and like you just become the professor of the school that we create and we make our own occult program. Because I
Yeah.
agree, I hear about those things where there are classes centered in witchcraft and they're either in the UK or they're not, they're
Accredited. Yeah.
yes, or it's just like something, it's different from maybe it's like what is in alignment with what I want to learn. And I do wish that there was more of that.
Well, don't threaten me with a good time,
if
Madison. I
if
feel like
you
I want to do
ever
that.
let's fucking do it. Lorraine and I have talked about her teaching some classes virtually through Spellcrafter because I really, really, really want to expand that. And so of course, immediately my brain is like forming curriculum of like, let's do it.
Oh my goodness.
Me,
Yeah,
I'm
that's on my
picturing
list.
I'm picturing us like having a boarding school with like uniforms, like
Oh yeah.
Wednesday style.
Yes.
Yeah, Sailor
Like-
Moon style.
Yes.
I'm like, I'm in. I feel like I don't know. I mean, I feel like I don't know what this country is doing these days, but up until maybe a year ago, I felt like that was the direction where we're going because of the big wave of like interest in occult and witchcraft practices that started around 2020. I feel like it wouldn't be unbelievable in like 10 or 15 years for there to be like an occult, history degree or something like that.
Well, yeah, we're starting it right now.
Yeah, let's do it. I really want to. In fact, a lot of my clients, they come to me with that question, is how can I go to school for this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was my question as well, and there was none. So I, had the privilege of exploring that on my own. But I say privilege, but then also I had to kind of recuse myself from some other paths. Like it did close doors doing this.
Mm-hmm.
There were academics who were like, this isn't academic enough,
Yeah.
because I refuse to like cite old white men and use their words. I'm like, that's not the point. The whole point is that we're breaking that paradigm, and here's a new paradigm, right? And so it wasn't academic enough, and that is why that was the impetus to like write Brujas, because I wanted to like save it from like all of that. And I shook it off as much as I could, but it also wasn't like a clean break.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like the first attempt to break off. And that's why I love Wiley and the Modern Witchcraft for Dummies book, because it helped me marry those two things in a more clean way, if that makes any sense. Like a more blank slate. Like, Wiley is an academic publisher in a lot of ways. It toes that line between pop culture and academia, and I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's where I'm at, that little sweet spot. And with like with the popularization of these kinds of podcasts, that sweet spot is more and more accepted.
Yeah.
I think this is the medium for it, is like video and podcasts, we've brought in academic voices into pop culture interests.
Yeah. I want to know, because you talk so much about how like the academic piece was sort of like exploring your curiosity. And I'm a sucker for a fun fact. I love a fun fact. What's something you learned early on in your academic career or even like your practice that like exploded your curiosity into studying this?
Mhm. I think for me, the first thing was syncretism. Syncretism is the merging of different religions, almost like in a layering kind of way. So, for instance, taking Santeria as the example again, the Cuban tradition Santeria, over time, as things became colonized and Christianity took hold, we had to occult, and the word occult means to hide those religions under the iconography of Catholicism. So it was almost like a intellectual excavation to go through the Catholic saints. Those Catholic saints would stand for Orishas, the saints of Santeria, which were deemed evil by Catholicism at some points. So that's kind of the academic entry point for me that was like blew my mind that these old religions were hidden in plain sight, and that the statue of the Virgin Mary in the corner could be Yemaya, or other kinds of icons of from other traditions. And that and I saw this actually in real time when I traveled to Cuba. Back when Obama opened it briefly, I went right away. And it was actually really strange to go because I'm not considered Cuban to them anymore, but also still considered Cuban enough to the government where they were like, should we detain you? Should we hold you here? It was really strange. I went right away, so they hadn't figured out the whole like travel thing yet.
Oh,
But that's
wow.
neither here nor there. So I met this woman called Fidela, and I talk about her in Brujas, and she showed me her altar, and she was praying to the Orishas, but through the saints of Catholicism. So I saw it actually how it is really done. Still to this day, she would talk about them in hushed voices and say, don't tell anyone we're doing this. But the iconography would be mixed. It would be Catholicism and Santeria together.
Wow.
And the public facing, like any of the public facing stuff was, you know, it was Catholicism, but then inside in private it was the Orishas. And it's all always political. It's always that's why I really go towards spiritual activism. Like I center spiritual activism in my work because you can't talk about religion without politics.
Mm.
And, when Fidel Castro led the revolution, he led it under the banner of Elegua, one of the Orishas, because he was trying to gain support from those people who believed in Santeria, and they helped install him as, the ruler of Cuba, and then he swiftly made those icons illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So that's a way that knowing the history, knowing what the symbology means is really important. How
Mm-hmm.
can you practice these things without knowing that, And like when you worship a saint, do you know all the layers of that saint and that God that you're worshiping?
Yeah. I learned that same thing on a voodoo tour in New Orleans, led by a priest of voodoo. And I had the same moment of that blew my brain fucking open of the way that the resilience of people, because it was enslaved people who were here being forced to assimilate to Christianity, who were
Mhm.
doing the same thing, practicing in secret. They were just like, okay, so we'll assign this new identity to the Orishas and be able to keep our spiritual practice. I had the same moment of like, holy shit, how do we not? I think that's what kind of opened me up to, okay, like the deep dive is what's important here. The deeper I would so much rather have a deeper understanding of like 2 to 3 core practices for myself than know a little bit about everything, because I'm learning the more I know, the less I know.
Yeah.
Mhm. Definitely.
Wow.
And I think you could do both too. I think you can learn a little bit about everything, especially starting off, which is what my book helps you do, is kind of dip your toes in and then decide what you want to dive into.
You're watching my mind be blown open, like in real time, by the way, because I did not know that. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Like the Castro piece, I didn't even know. I know very little about Cuba, to be perfectly honest with you. I just know like Cold War Castro bad. Like that's all I got, like what I learned in 6th grade social studies. But like, yeah, like just the idea of like using the symbol and then, you know, basically outlawing it. Like, of course that fucking happened. Like, I feel like I could come up with modern ways that is happening.
Yeah.
And has happened in the history. And it's so interesting that like history really does repeat itself. And like, why are we not taught these things, you know? Like, so that is a rabbit hole I will be going down. I can't wait to dive into your book.
Google syncretism. It is
Syncretism.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What is next for you? I mean, you got 2 books, you got, you know, a wealth of knowledge in you. Are you writing more? Are you letting this one lie? Are you recalibrating?
All of those things. Yeah, I'm in a transition moment, as I alluded to before, and I always have a project or 2 in the works. So I am working on a couple of things that will hopefully come to fruition in the next few months. At least one of those things, I'm hoping. Yeah, I won't say any more about it just to not jinx it, but stay tuned. In the meantime, I'm also just trying to balance all of the real world responsibilities, as I mentioned, you know, like I just need to get myself into a stable kind of income position and a stable health place. I feel like I am in the throes of like early perimenopause, and that would be a hint to like the project that's coming up. I'll just say that.
Oh,
So
inside scoop.
The Demystify Magic exclusive.
in true Lorraine fashion, I have a hard time separating my projects from what I'm currently going through. So
speaking to the choir,
yeah,
here, Lorraine.
You're in good company.
Yeah, Molly, have you talked about what you're working on the pod, or is it still secret?
The book?
Yeah.
Oh, the book will be out almost.
It is?
By the well, it will be February 17th.
Oh, cool. Oh, wow. Oh, that's eclipsey time. Interesting.
New moon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect
Awesome.
timing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyone listening who wants to pick up another book in addition to Lorraine's, maybe order Mundane Magic.
I have a great website where you can get them all. They're all available at a very niche website called shopspellcrafter.com. Well, for all of our listeners who will definitely want to be up to date about all of your fun, secret, exciting projects, where can they find you?
You can find me at witchyheights.com or at witchyheights on Instagram. My books are open for reading, so if anybody wants an astrology or tarot reading, I do this fusion astrology and tarot reading where you can, I use the houses of astrology so you can hone in on certain questions, areas of life. And I will apparently be working with Madison on some classes, offering them online.
Apparently, this is me springing it on her in a public forum, so she has to do it.
Apparently, we will be starting a school.
So, yep. So enrollment opens at some point.
Can't wait.
You must
uniforms pending. Yep. Inspired by Buffy.
Yes. And Sailor Moon.
Yes. Lorraine, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I am so excited for our listeners to get to know you. Please, if you love listening to Lorraine as much as I do, pick up Brujas, The Magic and Power of Witches of Color, or Modern Witchcraft for Dummies, or both. Highly recommend them both. Highly recommend her readings. Everything that you said to me, one of my favorite book club memories actually is we stayed late and I got a pizza and we sat in the dark library and did a reading, and it was so fun. Highly recommend. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. All right.
Did we do it?
I think we did it. We will see you guys next week.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Demystify Magic with Molly and Madison. All our links, from spells to ceremonies to ways to support us, are waiting in the show notes.
We'd love to hear your magic moment of the week. Share it in a review, tag us on socials, or bring it to our Patreon clubhouse at demystifymagic.com.
And remember, you are the magic.
Okay, love you.
Bye.